Hi, everyone. Good to see you. If you haven't been to an AI Marketers Guild event before, then welcome. We always get some first timers, and I think we have a number today. I'll make sure to share a link in the chat shortly for how you can join the community if you're not in it yet. But we do these calls every week. Often, but not always with guest speakers. Sometimes there are these great community conversations, and we just get to try to make sense of what's going on in AI and how it impacts marketers. And so I've I sometimes have the pleasure of catching up with Marc Maleh, who's over now at Huge as their global CTO. Mark and I connected through Progress Partners, or at least reconnected, through Progress Partners, which has this amazing exec in residence program, and they're this just terrific M&A firm that's also very much on top of like what's next, and so they just bring a lot of execs from different fields together, and it's got to be my favorite community outside of one that I run. But when we were talking about some of what's going on in AI, I'm like, yeah, I really wanted to get Mark's perspective. I've loved the agency Huge for years especially when I was over at the firm MRY under Publicis, and running marketing there. Huge was always the one that we felt we were competing the most against, just because like it was just like the best agency marketing I'd seen, so always really impressed with the work and just vision coming out of there. Mark introduced me to Clive, and Clive Henry's director of strategic partnerships at Adobe, and so we're just having some great conversations leading into this. And now I'm going to have the pleasure of not talking much more. Mark, if you want to do the honors of introducing yourself, and Clive, you can then do the same, and also just with a bit right off the bat, not just who you are, but like what your interest is in all this AI stuff. And then we can get in, explore things. And also, I've just got to remember, since we do have some first timers here, these are usually very interactive conversations. I'm happy to ask basically none of the follow-up questions if you have a lot of them. So feel free to put stuff in chat or do the hand raising thing, and we can see what interests you most about what Mark and Clive want to share. So Mark, I got to stop now. Mark, who are you? What are you doing here? Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, Marc Maleh, CTO over here at Huge. This is actually my second time at Huge. So I spent almost 4 years here. Prior, I left to go client side for a little bit, and I ran creative innovation at crypto.com during the whole crazy crypto era. Happy to talk about over drinks at some point with anybody about what that was like. And I've also, I've been in kind of the agency, world for about 25 years, 10 years at RGA, running a data science team over there, hardware teams. Spent some time at Wieden and Kennedy running technology. And I think what's interesting about kind of like my time at Wieden was actually this idea of like technology and storytelling and like how those things kind of came together. And then I also ran an artificial intelligence team actually at Havas. And, if you know anything about Havas, they're, primarily kind of a media-driven organization. I was on kind of the creative side of the world, but running the artificial intelligence teams. And, so I think like that was the first wave of like AI and Gen AI, like early chatbots and things like that, right? And I think, over time, I've kind of always been interested in the space, but always, just being very mindful of emerging technology generally and needing it to map to kind of like a consumer pain point. And that's where I think like, the creative side and the understanding of the user side and how it maps to technology has always been incredibly important, regardless of what the new technology is. And I think AI and Gen AI, I don't think are any different. And I think it's primarily around like, how are you using those technologies to create either business value or, a new type of paradigm within a consumer experience?
That's great. That's so much of what we like to cover here, because it's like, it's like, I mean, you can prognosticate all you want, but it's like like it's here, it's not going anywhere. It's mostly just getting better by the day. What do you do with it, right? And there's a great person to help us figure out what to do with it, who's working with someone with a company that's doing a lot with it and helping everyone else do a lot with it. So Clive, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Clive Henry. As David mentioned, I'm a director in our strategic partnerships program at Adobe. And what that really means is I'm helping them build out our partnership ecosystem around Gen AI. I've been at Adobe for about 10 years, worked with the largest systems integrators, agencies. For the last half a decade, I've actually been working really closely with the cloud providers. Scale partners, we call them at Adobe. And that partnership with the cloud providers has been about AI almost since the beginning for Adobe. The ML AI capabilities and incorporating those into the personalization strategies, or just like how we implement ML into our core product portfolio. Gen AI is a new paradigm. We're still relying on the scale providers in a lot of ways to bring this technology to market. But what we're doing at Adobe is we're activating this technology in our services for our customers, which are primarily marketers and creatives within the marketing department, or creatives generally. We made a strategic decision to release our own LLM, Firefly, it's called, for creative. We're also partnering with the OpenAIs and the Azure OpenAIs and the Anthropics of the world in some areas of our business. But for creative, what we've done is we've made sure that we have a trustable model, responsibly trained on Adobe stock imagery, where we have permission from the creators, where we have a relationship with the creators to ensure that there is an IP infringement taking place in the applications that leverage the Firefly model. Firefly was announced about a year and a half ago in March of 2023. And since then, we've been rolling out products at a rapid pace, faster than I've seen since my days of joining Adobe 10 years ago. So lots of new products. We've got APIs, model customization capabilities for creatives. We've got assistance in many of our marketing solutions, including our CDP, the Adobe Real-Time CDP, or you may know it as the Experience platform. So rapid product deployment, which makes establishing these partnerships are really interesting, because at the time that I'm introducing a product, there's usually a new one coming out in a month or two or a week or two. So we're seeing the practical end of this, what's getting licensed, what's getting implemented, and what's impacting the ROI of campaigning work that our marketer partners are doing.
So since you mentioned Firefly to lead off, a question for both of you from your different perspectives then. With this wave and era of Gen AI, to what extent is creativity changing? Is like the definition of it even changing, and how is it changing, or maybe how isn't it? Because it seems like a really big deal that a lot of us are grappling with.
Mark, do you want me to take this one first?
Yeah, kick it off. It's funny because I think this is actually something me and you talk a lot about. So yeah, you kick it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we realized at Adobe really early on is that the creative output of today of a generative AI system is almost never going to land 100% in the area of approved for publishing out to your audiences. Whether you're talking about, copy, right? Or, these generative models that are outputting content in the form of words for marketing execution, or imagery. Those products, those outputs need to be finished. So what we initially saw was a deep interest in pulling that content into the existing portfolio of editing tools and marketing orchestration tools that we take to market. But we were also seeing a lot of demand from our creative community to incorporate these capabilities directly into the tools. So what I would say is what Gen AI has done is it's added another spoke to the spin wheel, right? Like of the portfolio of tools that we have, you now have another tool, but that tool fits into your workflow along with the existing tools. It's a lot of learning involved, but I think both of these worlds are going to merge.
So, Mark, how does that mesh with the workflows at Huge?
I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I think thinking of these things as a tool in the toolbox is the best way to kind of look at it, right? And I think, over time, and everybody uses the, analogies of like, where new technology is fit into the world, and like, does it make jobs? Does it remove jobs? Like all of those things, like, everybody's like, oh, the ATM machine, was going to get rid of banks. Well, it didn't. It, actually created more jobs, right? But I actually think that the notion of a designer over time is changing, right? Like the internet came around and people that were designing for a print magazine now were UX designers, and that was like a whole new field, right? And I actually think the tools that they started to use were brand new, right? And I think they are now in this position, and I would say broadly creativity, whether it's design, whether it's image creation, whether it's, video, any of those things. It's now they just have a new tool. And I think what you'll find when it comes to creativity is that it can be more about creativity and not just efficiency and productivity.
Hmm.
And I think, something Clive and I have talked a lot about is like, what if you actually break up that idea that like, well, AI is just here to be efficient, right? If you actually think about it as a tool in the toolbox, maybe it makes certain aspects of your job more efficient, but you can actually look at it as unlocking more opportunities within creativity. And to me, that's actually what's kind of interesting and how we're thinking about a lot of it, here at Huge, is just this idea that like a data scientist, a UX designer, and a technologist, it sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, could like get in a room and actually get an understanding of what that new UX could be through the lens of artificial intelligence and data science and things like that. And to me, that's actually what kind of our positioning of intelligent experiences, which is what we're kind of, using as our kind of outgoing messaging, is really based on that. It's this idea that actually you can have these new ways of thinking about creativity.
And so,
Yeah,
I don't know, Clive, please.
I was just going to add a sentence or two to Mark's points, and that is there's a process here, and Gen AI fits into your existing process still. It doesn't remove that process. So what we saw early on was the tools were really being used for ideation, and everything beyond ideation were traditional tools. And then the second step that we saw was there were tools being used to scale the product, right? So localization, personalization, language, relanguaging, reformatting for language in different countries, or some of that creative. And the part in the middle, I think we haven't seen deep transformation. Eventually, I think there will be editing and finalization of marketing asset creation, aided by these generative AI tools, but you're still going to need people with the right skills to execute that, people who know how to train these models and validate brand alignment.
And yeah, and then even seeing like how much of that can be like, yeah, here's like just getting your inputs and your, and all your brand guidelines, like, consistent, and making sure that the LLM can understand them. And then it's like how much of that you need to do. I mean, like Mark, I mean, do you then do you think that that Gen AI has made Huge's work any more creative? And I know it's a very nebulous term here, but like than it was before Gen AI?
I don't think it's made it more creative, but I think it's made us think about new models of interaction, right? Both between our designers and our engineers and our data scientists and and products that they're using, but actually more importantly, the types of products that we're designing on behalf of our clients, right? It's like, we just launched, for NBCU for the Olympics, a platform called Ollie, right? And its whole kind of function, and this is a pain point I'm sure everybody on this call who is a fan of watching the Olympics has had, is you don't actually know when that sport that you want to watch is on TV, like especially when you're dealing with multiple time zones. And it was a really simple solving a pain point of a user, use of data and technology where you could query Ollie and it would essentially just tell you when exactly in your time zone that sport was, right? And I think it is different than thinking about the fact that it's making us more creative. It's actually just another surface for us to be creative on. And to me, I think that's what's interesting. And it's not just for our designers, it's for our technologists too. They have to know how to engineer on those types of things. In this case, with things like Gemini, they have to know how to work within those models and to even be able to work with our creatives to come up with that idea to start, right? So I think it's more about the surfaces that we can play with.
And Clive, I'm curious to get your take on the data piece too, because Adobe is known so much for what it does for the creative community, that people often forget about the workhorse side, Adobe, and what it does for basically everyone, creative or not, and the and the kind of data that your customers are working with Adobe products. So where does data fit in on that side of things for you?
Yeah, the way I think about it, David, and I think at Adobe is we're seeing a large language model and the creative output, the copy-based output. We're seeing this as a new data pipeline, right? Because there are these foundation models, but for a brand to really take advantage of these foundation models, they need to train these models. Marc was talking about like how creativity changes, and we had that question. We're seeing a new role evolve here, right? Not exactly a data scientist, but like a data aware creative, a person that can work with a large language model, tune it and customize it so that the output is close or aligned with the brand voice and the type of imagery that the creative teams, the brief teams have set up for that brand. We have a product called Custom Models at Adobe, and in order to interact with that custom model, the organization assigns a trainer. That person's not a data scientist, but they're a creative person who has the access to imagery, metadata associated with historic work that they've done or assets that they have rights to use to train these models. So I think that's one important data lens, is that models are being trained to generate the right outputs. The other lens is on the personalization side of our business, where marketers have gotten accustomed to working with Adobe tools to deliver trigger-based emails, personalized landing pages, or just really determine which assets from their asset management system should be part of display ad campaigns inside of social or outside of social. And that's not changing, right? What is changing is the amount of content, right? And the ability to measure that content to determine what is driving conversion, if content permutations are actually driving conversions inside of your personalization strategy. So the way I would describe this, David, is we've accelerated the ability to do personalization well because we're able to pair the data, measurement, trigger, right? We've thought about data in the past as something that we measure, we leverage for triggering, that personalization, that automated personalization behavior for the campaigns that we build. And now there's this third pillar, and that is content, right? And the amount of content that you can make available to execute those personalization campaigns.
Well,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
something just to add to that is, and we've been starting to do some of this work for some of our clients is actually, if you take personalization even a step further and make it not just about content, but make it about modules within an experience, that's pretty interesting to me, right? Like this idea that actually it's not just, you know, Netflix being famous in this world, for having different imagery based on, their recommendation engine, whether it's recommending Stranger Things to me or Stranger Things to my wife, right? Like they're famous for doing that for years now, right? But now imagine actually that the interface itself actually changes, right? Whether it's, a mobile app, whether it's a website, things like that, based on some of the things that Clive is talking about from a data perspective that we understand about the consumer. To me, that's actually a really exciting area where UX design and data science work really well together. Is it's not just purely content personalization, but it's actually kind of a dynamic UX, if you will.
Well, and I want to get to Brandon's question in a minute, but you've opened up something that I've wondered about, like how far we're going to go down this path of personalization, and like there's some line of thought that no two people will ever see the same website or even landing page, right? That everything's going to be personalized, and it's like is this something that we should be working toward, or should it be something we should be working toward avoiding? Is this like the kind of like holy grail of what we're all doing now, where we're going?
I mean, it's a good question. You could take it even a step further and look at the media industry, like why, or Hollywood. Why is it that, a movie that I watch isn't different from a movie that you watch, David, but it's based on the same script theory, right? But maybe it changes certain things based on what it knows about me. I mean, we're getting to a territory where that is technically very feasible. Uh,
Mhm.
to your point, what are we removing from the filmmaker's vision and from the filmmaker's, I'll use the word control, which sometimes is not a bad thing. I'm a terrible filmmaker, right? I would rather watch something from Steven Spielberg or Martin Scorsese because they're really good at what they do. Now, if they made a movie that was somewhat generative based on my preferences, that could be kind of interesting. But I also don't want to fully remove the notion of like the person's eye and vision from kind of that type of thinking. And I think UX and websites and all of those things have to find that balance, because there is also the creepiness factor, right? Like if everything is completely different and you're showing your cards of how much you know about the end user, maybe that's not a direction people are actually going to be comfortable with.
Yeah, I want to build on top of this whole the movie television, alternative story path analogy that you use, Mark. I actually joined Adobe as a streaming media expert a decade ago, right? So like when I first got here, I was working a lot with the television companies, and this topic of leveraging streaming to build like stories that had these alternative story paths were popular back then also. I think that is one opportunity area for this technology, but the area that Mark initially talked about, it's the web experience, right? Like we've all sort of started to lean into how to build personalization or personalize certain modules, certain frames within the web experience. And the initial opportunity here is that whole web experience may be changing. It may be becoming more conversational. And if it does become conversational, then what we're talking about when we say personalization is the personalization of the output based on what we know about the end user, if the end user is authenticated, if that experience is taking advantage of existing tools like CDPs and segmentation information to influence the way the prompt is treated for output. So there are new workflows here, but I think there are new experiences that are starting to take hold I took a look at Ollie, Mark, on the NBC properties, NBC Sports, in and around the Olympics, and I thought it was brilliant, right? I thought it was interesting that they didn't promote it very heavily. I think in 2028 we're going to see that promoted a lot more, right? This idea of generative AI assistance, conversational experiences, replacing the guide, the old TV guide, if you used one of those when you when you were young, and making personalized recommendations inside of those conversations. So just a different paradigm on personalization, but the same tech stack or similar tech stack being used to deliver.
So I did not pay Clive to say that, first of all. And we did get Al Roker did actually talk about it, which was pretty nice.
Not bad. We've got a lot of questions coming in both the chat and with the hand raising and yeah, some great discussion also in terms of like personalization. How do we prevent people's worlds from shrinking because you're only seeing your own perfectly tailored thing, and it's a lot of the conversation with algorithms in general, and is that doing more harm than good? Jay-Z, let's go to you, and here
Thanks.
so welcome.
Thanks for these two speakers. I love how technical it is, and I've built like personalized coupon apps that tell people you got this Target coupon because you've never been to Target, you've been to Walmart. We think, you would be good for switching up your store. And so people love seeing why they saw something, but also why they didn't see something else. So I'm wondering for our speakers and for your community, would you ever put an AI label like you're seeing this, but not seeing this? Do you want to see everything? Or, I saw Meta has a AI label now for any content. Like if you made it with AI, you should label it. So I'm curious what you guys think about just
Great
being
question.
transparent
Great
or
question.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, go Clive.
I'll start with this one, Mark. We have we're part of an initiative inside the creative industry. It's called the Content Authenticity Initiative here at Adobe, and it is a multi-company effort to identify content that was edited, right? And in the new iterations of what we call
Cool.
content credentials, content that was generated with generative AI technologies. Meta is one of our partners. So that capability that they're surfacing to you within the Instagram application that tells you if a piece of content was altered or generated with an AI system, that leverages these content credential capabilities that Adobe's been a big part of driving and developing. And with Firefly, this is incorporated into every asset that we generate, and we have a partner team that's working with all of these systems to ensure that these assets are being watermarked, even if it's just an editing of an existing asset or a new generation.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just to add on that, like I think I'm a fan of kind of being incredibly transparent to your end user about, what they're actually engaging with, whether it's content or whether it's an experience driven by AI. And I think being able to think about not only how are you being upfront about what is being used. Obviously, we're at a place where we talk about what is being collected from a data perspective. That's very good. But also how these things actually impact things like accessibility, right? Like, and I think like that's not even a territory that I think a lot of people from an AI UX perspective have fully thought about, right? Like, how do these highly personalized systems that aren't just content personalization actually taking into consideration accessibility concerns, right? I think John put up here kind of a link to the FTC, and I think similarly, obviously the EU has their new AI Act, and like being able to kind of have some standards and regulations within there. The US is always further behind on any of these kind of things. But I think we'll probably get to a place where there are some standards, just like there are some broader, web standards when it comes to these types of technologies.
I'm glad you two are into it because there's so many programmatic advertising platforms that don't tell you that you're being served something that a million other people are being served something different. And I love that you guys are making these investments. So thank
But
you.
look, I mean, there's a lot from history that we can learn. I mean, does everybody remember the like massive failure that Target had like 10 years ago about some flyer that was sent home? Does people are aware of this? I mean, basically, I mean, this is before all the modern day AI stuff, but Target was, you know, they had this internal system around being able to lightly personalize, you know, at-home flyers. And they figured out based on somebody's daughter's search history on the website that the daughter was probably pregnant. And they started
I
sending
remember that.
home all of these flyers about
Target
babies
all piss.
and things like that. And the parents were like, why are we getting all of this stuff at home? And then she was like, oh my God, I have to tell my parents. And it was a disaster. It obviously went viral on social media and like all of those things, but like Target really had to pull back from, you know, how they were thinking about that type of deep personalization. And we can learn a lot from things like that, even today.
Interestingly, I think one of the takeaways was, yeah, we should have just not so prominently promoted.
And
But like,
that's where design comes in, right? Like you can use the data in the right way, but think actually about the hierarchy in the design system, you know, in that case, print, but there's also the way you have to think about it when it comes to designing, you know, from a technology perspective. How are you actually thinking about the UX and the way the technology is actually going to function when you do want to do something like that without it being so over the top prominent?
yeah, I think that's going to be the art part of this science, is integrating it into like a human experience. David, you were on that great panel yesterday with Progress Partners, and I thought the statement that came up was really insightful, that this is one of the first technologies where our own human biases are brought into the seed set, right? I mean, how do these LLMs learn in the first place? They learn off of very human experiences. And so I guess I'd sort of put that out to you, like, or to Clive, like, if you're thinking about stuff at scale, how do you build some of this in from the very beginning, to at least, I mean, you can't prevent everything, but certainly there ought to be ways to enable you know, the builders, the creators should enable them to navigate the outer guardrails of those. Oh, you know, you don't want the accidental algorithmic cruelty. That's what I always
Yeah, this is an important question, Adam, I think. And we're seeing the rise of like this role of the creative technologists. And the initial part of this conversation has been quite technical. And I think there is like a technical answer to this question, and that is, with generative AI technologies feeding this personalization pipeline, we need to be more mindful of how these pipelines get built, right? And there's this step that I think we took a little bit lightly early on as we were building these personalization initiatives. Target's issue was 10 years ago. Marketers are more sophisticated today, but we need to be more serious about moderation, right? And if we're making lots of content, we are going to get to this place where it can't all be human-based moderation. There needs to be a mix of machine-based moderation where content is being reviewed against human guidelines. Not if the words or the grammar is correct, but if the tone of voice, the subject matter is aligned with the intention of the brand, the marketer, the person that's leveraging these tools to create content at scale. The way we like to think about this at Adobe is there will be a subset of this larger library of content that will be reviewed by machines. And some of that content will get flagged out to humans to check the efficacy of the machines, right? So this is a new set of steps in the pipeline towards personalization that protects us against, insensitive overly frequent messaging going out into the publishing platforms. All
Yeah,
right.
there's generally a lot of debate on human in the loop, right? And like, what does it actually mean? And like, even what's the value of human in the loop if the human who is in the loop doesn't even understand the system in the first place? Um, and I think there's like a little bit of a balance there that I want the industry to strike, right? Between exactly what Clive is talking about, but then also, how human beings actually frankly need to get trained on getting an understanding of what it means to be a human in the loop. And like their understanding of the system that is making the decisions, I actually think is incredibly important because, to Adam's point, just around biases and things like that, like you have to be able to kind of have that balance between the biases that the system is going to have based on the data sets, but then the balance that the human being potentially has based on them being in the loop. So I think that black box of kind of what they're looking at and understanding, like has to really be defined, and they frankly need to get trained on that idea of what their job looks like.
Loving all of this. Thanks, Adam. Alexander's been waiting so patiently with your hand up.
Thank you, David. And thank you also, Clive and Marc, for sharing a lot of great perspective. I'd be interested to get your take, as you both have very different interactions with enterprises and, clients, as we say in the ad industry, on just how they're thinking about AI from a couple of perspectives. You've touched a lot on things like governance and privacy and controls and the need to advance that stuff. But I'm also interested, your perspective just from a much more pragmatic perspective, sort of like build versus buy. Are companies looking to are they kind of creating their own AI systems in-house because there's AI in everything now? It's in Adobe, it's in Microsoft Copilot, or are they, still looking for sort of like trusted partners to help them navigate this emerging technology? Thank you.
Marc, I think that's for you.
Sure.
First,
I
at
mean,
least.
yeah, I mean, I think first of all, hi, Alex. I think what's interesting is like all the companies, not all, a lot of the companies that we're engaging with are, I think like many, starting from a place where they're doing proof of concepts. And they are actually going through a process many times with us to make the decisions around buy, borrow, build, or partner, or whatever it is, right? And I think that's an incredibly important step because you need to uncover things like the business value, things like, the usability, the user experience, actually prototype what the model is looking like, right? Like what are the responses that you're getting out of it kind of in that early phase. Where I think a lot of businesses are actually struggling is actually taking those things to the next step. Like actually being able to go from understanding the build, buy, borrow framework, building a proof of concept, and then actually moving it to a place where they're comfortable to have it be at a production level. I think, I was looking at something from Gartner the other day, and it was something like less than half of AI products that are started as a proof of concept within very large organizations actually go to production. And I think what was shocking about some of that data actually was that number was down from the year before. You would think actually the number would go up, but like it actually was down. And so I think like the rationale a lot of times is, in my experience, is kind of like that lack of business value to a degree is like, why are we actually doing this? Is it solving a consumer need? Is it going to actually improve the business side of the world? A lot of times there's lack of skill set. So it's great that they can get a proof of concept and they'll come to Huge to do the proof of concept. But then we're more like, this is what it's going to take to operationalize this thing year 1, 2, 3. They actually just don't have people internally after we engineer the whole thing to actually support, the thing. And then a lot of times, to be honest, what we were even talking about before is even just a lack of clean, accessible data, which I think that area I have found is actually being solved relatively quickly. by a lot of our clients, and they're coming to us to actually help them understand like what is the locked up data that they have and what is the value of it. But a lot of the other concerns right now are, I think, preventing people from getting really to that next step. Does that kind of answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm on side. Really, at 99, maybe 100% Mark. I think we're in this experimentation phase with brands, with large enterprises in general, trying to understand what the consumer response will be. Jay-Z asked a really important question, and that is, what level of transparency makes sense in this new generative AI world? The message you send me, the images that you're sending me, how they're being generated, the characters, should brands be telling? Should an automotive brand be telling the consumers that are looking at their ad content that, the automobile is real, right? It was generated with Blender or Adobe Substance, but the backdrop that shows the automobile in the Swiss Alps or the Colorado Rockies or in New York City was generated with generative AI. So what levels of transparency? And you just can't know these things until you have engaged a bit with consumers or customers on what they feel comfortable, how to find that non-creepiness factor, like we all had to do with our personalization campaigns. So there's a lot of that happening right now. I would say the data piece and how it goes into the parts of the creative process that are not the output, right? Meaning I can storyboard faster, right? I can ideate faster, right? I can build permutations of the content for personalization campaigns a lot quicker, right? So I can analyze, I can campaign, right? I can build the campaign faster, right? And look at more permutations. This is happening at scale today,
And
right? These tools are being used to improve, that strategizing and planning process.
yeah, and it brings to mind this example of the Civil War ads, and I posted a link to the controversy that at first it was like, oh, what's so controversial about using AI in ads? And it's like, they were creating promotional materials for this film that were inauthentic, these stills weren't from the film itself, and so it was like it was just taking it too far, and those who knew this are like you go into this and it just doesn't meet those expectations. And this is where I think like that line of, because Clive, from I mean, Adobe, like basically, and this is not an ad for Adobe, this just coming from me, like it set the standard with Photoshop for creativity, and when that's mostly a positive thing, but there's a pushback if it's like a human being, right, and you're making them look too different, then it can be very inauthentic and could draw some backlash. So it's also fascinating that we're having this conversation now, but like, was there ever that conversation of like using Photoshop at all in
I mean, I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna, to a degree, kind of poke the beast here, but like, this is a question maybe for anybody, but like, how different is what we're talking about right now from, the automotive industry filming, their TV commercials in abandoned Chinese cities to make it look like New York City? Like, honestly, what's the difference? Like, the automotive industry has been doing that for years because it's significantly cheaper to ship a car over there, make a place look like New York, and they don't have to deal with all the New York City, regulations and taxes and prices to film their TV commercial there. Is it really that much different? I mean, I'm saying this to kind of be provocative, but like, it is not that dissimilar.
And so I want to welcome our next recent. Is it Shantanu? Please
Yeah, so
correct me.
thanks, Lee. No, yeah, so guys, so thanks, Mark, Clive, Dave, for the conversation. I think one question I had was, do you foresee like insurance companies offering insurance on Gen AI generated videos, audios, images for regulation-specific industries like financial services, healthcare, across jurisdiction? It's like a whole gamut of different jurisdictions that may apply. So curious to hear your thoughts on how you see the insurance landscape evolving for Gen AI.
The answer to that question is yes. All right. With Adobe Firefly and the products that we build on Adobe Firefly, we offer a form of insurance to our clients that use this technology to produce work that they share publicly. It's indemnification, right? But there's also an industry forming around the models themselves and the use of their outputs in different applications. Right. Again, like at Adobe, we're focused on the marketing and the creator applications, but you can go to existing insurance providers or new insurance providers that are being funded by the VC communities that are building the ecosystem around these models and purchase insurance so that you're protected in the case that you find yourself in litigation for the use of these technologies. Great question, Shantanu. And I do appreciate your first name. It's the same as my CEO's first name.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think the insurance industry is you know, a pretty interesting one, purely because of the vast amounts of data that the insurance industry actually has. And I mean, they've been using data for God knows how long. I mean, there's a very real reason that Geico asks me my education level, you know, before it gives me automotive insurance. I mean, they have that very buttoned up. So I actually think if anybody, the insurance industry is completely ripe to kind of be an innovator in that space.
You know, since so much of our discussion is also around transparency, I'm curious, and Mark, I do want to start with you on this one, as far as like internal transparency goes, and in terms of dealing with clients, right? And are there policies in place now or guidelines for when AI is influencing the process, and what are your expectations? What are clients' expectations? And I would love any perspective there.
Yeah, I mean, so at the end of the day, when you work in an agency, you are you know, you are charging your clients, it's pretty simple, for people's brains over time, right? Like pretty simple. Now, we have a bunch of you know, tools that we have incubated internally that we use, whether that's for, you know, segmentation, whether that's for, you know, understanding synthetic users, things like that. So like we use those tools when we're working with our clients, but we talk to them about it. And some of our clients are more comfortable and less comfortable. And I would say, you know, it's no different than, you know, the way we have to communicate to them on, say, a library that we want to use on their front end engineering. So I think we are very transparent with them about the tools that we are using. I think to Clive's point, in regards to where we're seeing a lot of the Gen AI kind of content creation as well, like we are primarily using them, you know, for work in progress experiences and content and things like that. But we are, again, being transparent with them that, hey, like this, what you're seeing right here, maybe I used Firefly to create an image of what a new Nike store is going to look like based on a model that I trained. We tell them that, right? Like we are being very honest with them about where that imagery is coming from. So I think it's all about transparency and you know, not kind of burying the lead at all.
You want me to take that one also, David?
Oh, by all means, yeah.
Yeah, I think Mark sort of nailed it. The Adobe lens on these things is we are also learning and collecting feedback from our service provider partners. I spend most of my time with Gen AI practice leaders inside of agencies and systems integrators, listening to you know, their requests for tools that can deliver this transparency, allow them to flag content, inside of their experiences in different ways that are generated using these tools versus ones that are produced within traditional studios. So we're collecting feedback all the time and trying to incorporate some of these capabilities into our software tools.
Amazing. Well, well, with all this, I mean, we're hitting the 4-minute mark now, and I just love Marc, Clive, like any closing thoughts. We've got a lot of open threads right now, and I hope you come back sometime to help us see where these threads are going, since I don't think any of them will be fully resolved. But would love just any final takes on some things you wanted to add to anything in our discussion today.
Sure,
Wow,
I'll go
go first.
Yeah, Mark, you can close. The thing that didn't come up today that I've been thinking about a lot, that I think generative AI opens a new door for what we do as marketers, is this whole concept of multimodality. It's the idea that you've created a campaign that is working well, or you've created a storyline that is working well with your audience, with the consumers, and now you want to expand the modes at which you deliver content that is, adjacent to the original created piece. So things like, I have a 2D campaign, I have a poster or a banner or a display ad that's performing really well. How quickly and easily can I convert that into a video and add audio to it, right? Or I have images that I want to turn into 3D images quickly and place them in different environments. So this whole idea of transforming content, right? Existing content that's from our existing portfolio of campaigns, I think is something that's really interesting for us to think about and is happening pretty quickly in the industry.
Awesome. We could do a part 2 on multimodality. Love it. Marc.
I would say that, everybody knows the line, like, the cost of inaction. And I think, my closing thought would be like, make sure you're not stuck kind of in that territory where, you're paralyzed by fear, or maybe the brand is paralyzed by fear. I think their longer term is going to be a greater cost of inaction if you don't actually start to experiment, understand the business cases, understand, what your users are looking for. I think we're at that moment right now where the expectation from a user experience standpoint is changing. And I think if you're not acting and not actually taking some risks out there, you'll probably be left behind a little bit. That would be my kind of like quick closing thought.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for this, and thanks for so many folks for being part of the discussion. You can see upcoming events on our calendar. We're going to announce a bunch more guest speakers pretty soon, because I think September is going to be a lot of fun too. But Marc, Clive, you're welcome back anytime. Just it's like I would easily could have gone another hour just for some of the questions in the community alone. So feel free to follow up with anyone. Happy to send you the chat as well if there's anything you want to dig deeper into. But everyone have a great rest of your week. Thanks again for being here. Share follow-up thoughts in Slack as well, and look forward to just continuing a lot of these conversations.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, thanks for having us.
Take care. Bye.